Welcome back, guys. So we have been exploring perspectives for a while and learn how we can create realistic space on a flat surface. Now, I want to take a look at this drawing. We have figure number 1, 2, and 3, one being on the left. Can you tell me which figure looks the biggest? Actually, they're all the same size. We perceive the figure on the top right to be the biggest because of the orthogonal lines. By using perspective, you can create an illusion of receding shapes getting bigger, even though they are the same size, the power of perspective. So for today's lesson, I'm going to go ahead and start off the lesson with a new artist, Gustave Caillebotte. He was a French impressionist like Claude Monet or Renoir, but he was very different from other impressionists. Caillebotte's paintings were more realistic manner than many other impressionist painters. After returning from Franco-Prussian War, he was very keen on understanding what the modernization of Paris was doing with its people. So we can see Caillebotte using Paris Street as a background, and therefore he had to accurately capture the perspective using 1, 2, 3, or multiple perspective, which is what we're going to learn. So naturally, I thought I'll use his painting as today's lesson. So let's take a look at something that we're already familiar with. Can you guess what type of perspective view is used on left and right painting? That's right. It's using one-point perspectives on both paintings here. That's really easy for us to understand. But take a look at this painting. How many vanishing points do you see? So it's very obvious that those two paintings that we saw earlier were one-point perspective, but we're looking at Paris Street, The Rainy Day, painted in 1875. This is a massive painting. The figures are life-size, depicts a specific location in modernized Paris, the Place du Dublin. We see all the clues that suggest that we can observe the figure sizes changing, and figures on the back are smaller, whereas the figures on the front are big or almost life-size. We also see overlapping figures and aerial perspective. And aerial perspective means that things that are further out is more blurry with generalized color. So if we look at these two ladies on the back versus this lady on the front, we can see they're a little bit more blurry and their colors are much more sketchy-like. So let's go back to that first question. How many vanishing points do you see here? 1, 2, 3, or more, maybe more? There are actually 3 different vanishing points, which makes this multi-point perspective paint. So let's take a look at where that 1 point will be, right there. If we follow the edges of this building and edges somewhat of this street, because it's curving, it's not really totally following the orthogonal. But if you take a look at this red and green building, it's following that 1 vanishing point. But we also see another vanishing point on the left-hand side right there. It is off and it is hidden by the building itself, but it is still following that orthogonal line. Now, there's one more vanishing point. Can you guess where that is? It is actually also hidden on the right-hand side right there. So on the horizon line, we're seeing 1, 2, and 3 vanishing points, which makes this a multi-point perspective. And if we look at his sketch, it is much more evident here. So we see 1 vanishing point, 2, and off to the right, 3. So if we separate the painting like so, we can see much more clearly where the vanishing points are. So just like what we learned, we have multiple different types of linear perspective. 1, 2, and 3-point perspective, and a multi-perspective drawing. So there are actually 4 different types. So that's what we're going to learn today. So I wanted to point out before I differentiate different perspective points. 1 and 2-point perspective drawing is what we are going to focus on. We're going to learn how to draw. 3-point perspective and multi-point perspective is going to be useful more in advanced levels. So we'll revisit that. So let's go ahead and get to actually understanding perspective. So we are all aware of 1-point perspective. We're seeing all the orthogonal line going to that 1 point, and we're facing the front surface of this box. Now, if we turn this box and we're seeing the angle facing us, we see 2-point perspective on the horizon line. We have width and length that goes to 1 point and 2nd point, and the height always being vertical. So we have 3 different types of lines here. 1 that's vertical, length that's going to 1 vanishing point, and width that goes to another vanishing point. Now, if we take this 2-point perspective, and if we pretend that we're looking down at it, we're going to create 3-point perspective. Now, notice, it's the same thing. The length goes to 1 point like the 2-point perspective. The width goes to another vanishing point, but because we're looking down, we are seeing all the vertical line no longer being vertical, but sort of receding to another vanishing point, which is going to be 3rd perspective, 3rd vanishing point. Now, we don't just look down, we can also turn our head and look up and have a vanishing point up in the sky, which is shown here. We see length, again, going to 1 vanishing point, width going to 2nd vanishing point, and all the vertical line again, but this time going to sky, making the 3rd point perspective. So we have a very clear 1, 2, and 3-point perspective. Now, when you have multiple 2-point or 3-point, or we could have multiple different vanishing points depending on how objects are aligned, then we call that multi-point perspective. So let's go ahead and take a look at 2-point perspective and the definitions of it. We already revisited 1 point, so we can skip right over it. So 2-point, things are seen at an angle. We are always going to see the angle, which are not looking at the front, but at the angle or corner are drawn in 2-point perspective. Now, 2-point perspective technique contains 2 vanishing points on horizon line, just like so. We see 1 vanishing point, 2 vanishing point. 1 more, this time this is hidden behind this building, but we see this as a vanishing point and 2-point perspective. So if we look at different photos, we see very clearly 1 vanishing point, 2 vanishing point, making this 2-point perspective. We can also utilize 2-point perspective in interior design here like this. This is a student example. We are seeing 1 vanishing point and 2 vanishing point, making this ideal 2-point perspective interior space. Now let's take a look at 3-point perspective. We see 1 point somewhere out here, 2 points somewhere out there, 3-point out there. Always follow the vertical line, width line, and width line, and you'll see easily 3 vanishing points. So let's take a look at some of the examples. We see this building, 1 vanishing point out here, 2 somewhere out there, and 3 somewhere out in the space. We often see this 3-point perspective in cartoons like this as well. So 3-point perspective technique contains 2 vanishing points on the horizon and 1 extra vanishing point either above or below the horizon line. Now, multi-point perspective. The last type of linear perspective is the last point perspective. And we saw multi-point perspective with Gustave Cabo's painting, The Rainy Paris Street. Now, if you take a look at this one, we have multiple, 6 different vanishing points. That makes this a multi-point. This is actually, oops, you're not often going to see multi-point perspective. It's more realistic. It's just easier for us to draw 1 or 2 vanishing points. So that's what we're going to focus on. So I'm going to practice how to distinguish 1-point perspective and 2-point perspective with you using some photos. After these practice, you are going to take a quiz on your Schoology where you are going to give in 10 different photos and you need to identify which one is 2-point and which photo is 1-point perspective. So let's practice together. So here we have, which one is using 2-point perspective view, A or B? If you chose an answer choice A, you're correct. This building is using 2-point perspective. 1 vanishing point out here, and I'm going to follow the edge of this building and 2-point. Again, we're seeing the edge of the building. B is actually 1 vanishing point, so 1-point perspective. Now, which one of below photo is using 2-point perspective? Photo A or photo B? Photo B is the right answer. We see the edge of the building and we're seeing 1 vanishing point off to street and another one out of photo, but we can guess that there will be a vanishing point somewhere out there. Right, which one of below photo is using 2-point perspective, A or B? It's going to be B because again, we are seeing edge and 1 vanishing point out there and another vanishing point out there. Which one is 2-point perspective view, A or B? It will be A. We are seeing 1 vanishing point and another vanishing point to the left, and we're seeing the edge of the building, making this 2-point perspective. B will be 1-point perspective view. Last one. Which one is a 2-point perspective, A or B? It will be A because even though this is interior space, this is going to be 1 vanishing point here and 2nd vanishing point right there. So you guys got it all right? Then you'll be great and you'll ace your quiz and it's going to be very simple. So go to your Schoology and open up 2-point perspective quiz and good luck.